Gentlemen, I'd request all of you to please wear your headset. You can hear me a bit better then. So on behalf of the Africa-Europe Foundation and Sustainable Energy for All, I welcome you to the SDG 7 Pavilion for the Global South. Thank you very much for spending your evening on this very important day with us. COP fever is only picking up and we have a long way to go. By quick way of introduction, my name is Kanika Chawla. I'm the Chief of Staff and Director of External Programs at Sustainable Energy for All. And we're deeply committed to the cause of advancing the critical energy transition minerals in a way that resets the equity in the energy markets across the world. And my best testament to that is I started the day today talking about energy transition minerals, and we're closing the day out with this session. So earlier today, with our partners, with whom we have the Council for Critical Mineral Development in the Global South, we had a really important discussion around green supply chains and really the role of developing countries in making sure that they're ready for the energy transition, both of the world as well as the one in their own countries, and how they can be a lever for advancing the energy transition all over the world. And the reason this conversation is important here at COP is because the energy transition minerals are central to us realizing the goals of the Paris Agreement. In order to reach the goals of the Paris Agreement, we're going to see a 6-fold increase in the demand of energy transition minerals. That's $400 billion worth of energy transition minerals that are going to go into advancing the energy transition. And one of the things that does is, well, we get the energy transition, but we also get a lot of economic prosperity for communities that have been custodians of these minerals for decades. And really, that is why developing countries need to focus on this opportunity. But also, we are excited today to hear from the European context how the issues of demand, the issues of energy security and diversification, as well as some of the enabling support that European countries can provide to countries around the world in order for them to participate in this $400 billion opportunity. But before going any further, I would like to invite Dr. Kande Yumkela, who is both an ambassador for the Africa-European Foundation, a close friend and champion of Sustainable Energy for All and its original pioneer, but also the chairman of the Presidential Initiative on Climate Change, Renewable Energy, and Food Security in Sierra Leone. So, he has a few small things to do. But right now, I'm going to hand over the floor to him.
It's a pleasure and honor to be here as part of the Africa-Europe Foundation, part of SEforALL, Friends of Europe. But more importantly, I'm from a country where we're sitting on critical minerals. And it's a subject we're tracking. My president and other African heads of states are tracking this issue closely. We know the deposits are concentrated in a few countries. We happen to be one of them, but our neighborhood, Liberia, Guinea, Sierra Leone, unlike Nigeria, we have a lot of these. They have oil, but we have these minerals, right? Right, Damilola? We're very concerned. Markets are fragmented, concentrated. Refinery capacity is even more concentrated. And now we see the emerging geopolitics. Emerging geopolitics of critical minerals. Some are making separate partnerships with our countries. Some are coming through the front door. Some are going through the back door. Some are coming even through the windows. Meaning it's not very transparent. We want the global energy transition to go well, to go smoothly. We want it to be inclusive. But we also want to benefit. We've had experiences with minerals now over 100 years. We don't want the same things repeated that were done before. And so for us, we look at Europe as a good friend. We're your nearest neighbors. You, like everybody else, needs these minerals. We want to talk about new partnerships that are win-win, that will benefit Europe, that will benefit us, and benefit the greater world. Our countries have also developed just energy transition plans, green growth plans. Damilola just helped our country develop our first one with the best knowledge systems in the world. Thank you very much. But as we look at that green growth plan, we've looked at the demand for energy in the mining sector, but we're also looking at value addition, and President Ruto is leading that, green manufacturing. And we're asking the question, can we be part of global value chains, not just mineral supply chains? We want to add value. We want to look at regional cooperation, where at least some stages of that processing can be done in our region. 30 to 40% of those critical minerals are in Africa. Europe needs them. How do we have new partnerships? But also, you got to give confidence. And I think one area where you can give us confidence is already with climate finance. I believe Europe should move faster in helping our region organize their carbon markets. There are ways to do it. I see SEforALL is beginning to do that support. This morning I was in their first panel with countries. That's attracting a lot of money for some of those countries. In other words, can we build trust using instruments that are there now? Can we also build capacity so our countries can benefit and we benefit the rest of the world? These are concerns we have. They're human rights issues. I will not raise them now, but those are also connected. When I heard 400 billion, immediately in my head, I said, how much will go to my village? Because I was told we have zircon too, which we never knew we had before. We're told now we have lithium as well, platinum and nickel. So we're discovering every day. But we want to benefit. We want our people to get wealth. We want them to get jobs as well. We all want to go green. So that's my introduction. It's about rights, it's about better trading systems, but also better institutions. The multilateral system as it is now is not capturing this well. How do we get a new pathway? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Yamkela. So we're going to do today's discussion in two parts. So first, actually, if I may, I will introduce all of the panelists and also request them to maybe pose for a little family picture. We do the smiling first and then get into the tough conversation. So first, it's my great honor to introduce to you Dieter Jürgensen, the Director General for Energy at the European Commission and the co-chair of the UN panel on critical energy transition minerals. I'm also very happy to introduce my friend, Marikito, the Interim Director of the African Mineral Development Center and member of the same UN panel on critical energy transition minerals. SRSG Damilola Ogunbiyi, who any of you who have been at this pavilion know well. But also SEforALL has been a strong supporter and back-end secretariat of the same UN panel on critical energy transition minerals. And please also join me on stage, Ms. Nikruka Maduekwe, the Director General and CEO of the National Council on Climate Change of Nigeria. This is the Women in Transition Minerals and Dr. Yamkela. But maybe we can do a quick photo. So maybe if you all can stand for a family photo. This is the kind of gender balance we want. Thank you very much. And Dieter, if I may start with you. As co-chair of this panel on critical energy transition minerals, the recommendations of which are now being socialized and also implemented, what does this mean for closer Africa-European engagement, but also what does it mean in general for developing countries? What are the key takeaways that developing countries can take from this?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Damilola, for hosting us here. It's so good to be here. Congratulations on the recognition of all your work that we've seen earlier this week. Very well deserved, and I think really a sign of the times that what you do is important, and what we can do here at COP29 is the path forward. The role of energy and the energy transition, access to energy in our fight against climate change. So I think we are here to discuss a topic that is complex, that is fraught with history. As you say, there is experience. We have seen that things have not worked the way they should. We can see that markets and the systems, the governance we have not delivered what needs to be delivered in terms of justice and equity and transparency. But I also think that we come here with hope, with optimism, with grounds for hope, because the UN Secretary General has responded immediately to what were calls from, in particular, resource-rich leaders of resource-rich countries in the global south, in Africa, many of them, saying we need to address this issue of the lack of justice, the lack of equity, the lack of transparency in the critical energy transition mineral value chains. That is a problem, and that is something we have to address as we try to accelerate the energy transition, accelerate the deployment of renewable energy, accelerate energy efficiency. We know that we're going to need, as you said in the opening, much higher quantity of minerals, and we know that we need to do that in a way that is different. We now have the report of the panel, and many thanks to my co-panelists. Marit, so nice to see you here. Kirsty, you as well. We've had a number of conversations this week, including a really important meeting that the UN Secretary General called for. He invited leaders to join him yesterday to look at how to advance the findings of the report, how to implement it, asking leaders to tell what they were planning to do, but also saying that he, as the UN Secretary General, will take this forward, starting with a proposal early in the new year, we hope, to establish a group, and a high-level expert advisory group to work to advance the findings, the recommendations of the panel, and most notably focusing on what you were pointing to, Kunde, which is the fact that the value chains in green technologies do not reflect the critical nature, if you will, of these minerals, and that countries that are rich in minerals, that are geologically wealthy, do not see that translate into wealth in terms of local value addition, participation in the green technology value chains, jobs, opportunities. Far too often, the wealth in minerals has translated into environmental degradation, human rights challenges, child labor, a number of significant challenges. So that is what we need to change. And I think one of the things we agreed on, and I think you were actually the first to say it, Marit, was that justice requires change. And everyone in the panel agreed that yes, justice requires change. You will see that is reflected in the panel report. And that will have to be, I think, help being a driver for change. And I think you're absolutely right, Kunde. When we talk about the value chains, we need to talk about the entire value chains, from before extraction, from the analysis, from the geological work to prepare possible extraction, where are the minerals, to the extraction, to the processing and refinement, but also into the further manufacturing of the technologies, whether it is batteries or electric vehicles or photovoltaic, whatever it is, that those value chains are the full ones, and going all the way to the end use, what happens? The recycling, trying to be much better at collecting the minerals that are inherent in our products in the green technology value chains, so that we can recycle more and make best use of the minerals that are there. And that is what we should be looking at. And so and that is what we try to address in the report, in our recommendations, but also in the both in the principles, but also the recommendations for action that the UN Secretary General has now suggested, that there is a common UN follow-up. And there was broad support in the meeting yesterday, and that gives reason for hope. The work we carried out in the panel, it is being welcomed, it is being taken forward, and certainly we in the European Union are fully committed to that. So you asked about the European Union. My president, Ursula von der Leyen, at the General Assembly and Climate Week in New York, expressed full support for the findings of the report. So we in the European Union are fully engaged to try to advance it, implement it, and bring it forward. You asked what do we do concretely to do that. We try to align all of our policies, all of our activities with the findings and recommendations of the report. We have our domestic regulation. To give you one example of what that means concretely, is we have regulation that requires due diligence in the supply chains, meaning that you as a company, you as a buyer, have to look at where does it come from, how has it been produced, does it live up to what are already existing global commitments on child labor, on environmental protection, on greenhouse gas emissions. So this is there, and that will our consumer side, if you will have to take that into account. It will be reflected in our partnerships with countries, including very much countries in Africa. We are each other's neighbours. We have a long and complex history, and also here it is time for change and time to work together so that we can build win-win partnerships and build support investments in Africa and help support the possibility for countries in Africa, whether it is resource-rich countries or their neighbours, their regional cooperation, to bring local value addition and beneficiation, jobs, and everything that goes with it. So there is that partnership, and then there's our trade and investment partnerships. We're building new clean trade and investment partnerships with countries across the world, but again with a significant focus and partnership with Africa, building on what we are doing already, and then supporting through financial support investments into value addition, for example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is another resource-rich country that has not benefited from the resources, that have not drawn the wealth that should follow from those resources. And then to come back to the multilateral, because unless we work together, unless we advance the work of the panel, the findings of the panel in the multilateral system, it is not going to happen. Our bilateral and plurilateral partnerships are important, but this is a global issue and it requires a global response, which is why we are so glad to see the Secretary General advance it here and to hear the support from among leaders. So my hope is when we see each other a year from now in Belém, that more will have happened, that these recommendations have been taken forward, that there is actually a high-level advisory group that will take it forward, that will be existing, that will be identifying what is it concretely that we can do for local value addition and beneficiation. What does it mean in the field of trade? What does it mean in the field of industrial policy? What does it mean in investments? And hoping also that the system, the suggestion for transparency and traceability will have been taken forward, that we are well advanced into discussions about what should it look like, how do we do it? Because only with transparency and traceability can we ensure accountability, and only with accountability can we help bring equity, trust and justice into these systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Lite. If I can take that to you, Marit. I mean, the Africa Mineral Development Center has for long been a custodian, let's say, of the Africa mining vision, which is now, you've traveled a long distance to where you are now with your draft minerals policy, which you are socializing. What is the work that has already gone in, but also what is required for Africa to be ready for this opportunity?
Thank you very much for inviting me, SEforALL, and everyone here. And I'm happy to be representing the African Union in this panel and in the critical energy transition panel of the SG. As you were saying, we have this vision, Africa mining vision, for 15 years now, since 2009, because there was another commodities boom back then. And I'm not saying that we didn't make any progress, because out of the 20 most producing countries, mineral countries in Africa, most of them have reformed their policies to align it with the Africa mining vision. And this vision looks at minerals from the whole value chain perspective, from policies, regulatory frameworks, to the geology, to value addition, linkages to the economy, to the environment, capacity building, and artisanal small-scale mining, which is prevalent in our countries. But as Sierra Leone was saying, it hasn't translated to transformation of lives of the people on the ground. So this critical minerals boom, we call it the green minerals, and we have developed an African green mineral strategy. Why we call it green is because they are inputs to the green industry, and because they are feedstock to the industrialization process, not critical in terms of vulnerability of supply or the kind of definitions that the other jurisdictions have. They overlap mostly, but we have some that are green that are not in there, but for other reasons. So why has it really worked? So, and since we are here talking about our partnerships, what needs to be changed? First of all, we have to really, the essence of the African mining vision is that we need to add value on the continent locally. That's where you create jobs, that's where you have transfers of skills, that's where you have technology, and that's where you transform the economy. Otherwise, if you just go in the paradigm of just exporting raw materials, then you export a lot of things, including jobs. And even if you receive it through fiscal and taxation, there's illicit financial flows, transfer pricing, all of it. So the surest way of retaining value on the continent is through value addition. So AMV is, the African Mining Vision is big on that, but since we are talking about what needs to change, and that's your question, I suppose, then the partnerships have to change. First of all, we have to, even for it has to be win-win. And I know the critical minerals strategy for Europe also sees the local value addition as an input. And it could be a partnership because we need the technology, we need the skills, and we have the minerals, so it could be a win-win partnership for both. We need infrastructure, like hard infrastructure, but also soft infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and that could be somewhere that we can also work together. That needs to be changed, we also need the skills. We can talk about all these value addition, but the ecosystem around the skills needed, we have to work together. Maybe have regional hubs, things like that. Like we have to think very practical. And we need the financing. Of course, capital, the big K, the big C is needed. And of course, we can leverage our own local African institutions like Afreximbank, African Development Bank, but we all still need some critical amount of financing because it's very capital intensive. And the energy. We are here at the COP. We want to go green, but all these factories need energy. So how do we partner for renewable energy? What kind of schemes do we come up with? So these are the kind of things that we really need to look at. And this part, the panel that Dite was talking about, the critical energy transition panel, came up with so many actionable recommendations. And one of them is to have this high-level advisory panel on value addition with equity, but also on other issues such as taxation, trade. Another issue is the trade. It would be amiss for me not to bring that up because it still is a barrier that processed, refined goods are not really, it's the current dispensation that it doesn't allow countries to refine. So that's also need to change. The paradigms need to change. In Africa, we have the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, but it has to allow for our refined products to also be traded in that system. So this kind of changes all around. And for that, we need partnership. Win-win. We cannot do it alone, but we need like win-win partnerships. Thank you.
Maybe we should. Damilola, turning to you, as co-chair of UN Energy, what is the role that you think of the UN system in enabling these kind of partnerships? And I mean, of course, we have our South-South collaboration program, but also more generally, Dite talked as well about multilateralism, Marit talked about partnerships, and the thing that you like to talk about all the time, green industrialization. This is the economic opportunity of our lifetime.
I don't know. Can everyone hear me? Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to our pavilion, and special thanks to the Africa-Europe Foundation as well. It's always great to have all these events with you, and great to have Dita here as well, because this is such an important topic. I think, we keep on talking about what outside needs to do. I think we have to look internally as Africans. And this is particularly important because without the right following through on the right policies and regulations, even within our own countries, it does make it very, very difficult. Excuse me, sorry. It does make it very, very difficult for people to come and invest, right? And then there's also, in terms of the UN energy and UN system, I think the first thing that we can really support countries on is very similar to what we've done in Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Ghana now, is on the data, on what do you have and how do you value it, and what are types of investments that countries have to make sure these things are possible. And that's where obviously there's been a lot of support by the European Union, through GIZ and all their other institutions as well. But I also think that we are at the cusp of a groundbreaking project, right? AFDB and World Bank have said they want to power 300 million Africans by 2030. This power has to be clean, right, and green. So seemed like, for me, a no-brainer, not necessarily that you have to manufacture solar panels and everything, but at least the assembly has to be happening on continent to supply the same projects that African governments have borrowed money to be able to fund, So that's me in a very practical sense. So when you're borrowing money to electrify your own people, what is your strategy of where's the equipment coming from? What are the minerals needed to supply this demand as well? And I'm really glad that both of you mentioned this trade thing. Crossing borders around Africa is more difficult sometimes than going from Europe to Africa. So as Africans, we have to make it easier. I'm really happy with what EXIM is doing by having the currency framework, country by country, local currency, and then using their lovely computing skills to figure out what the cost at the end of the day is. But we also have to say, what is the infrastructure of trading within ourselves? These critical minerals that we're talking about, and I'm thinking about it for renewable energy resources, isn't all to export to somewhere else. Right? It's to also utilize within the African continent. Are we looking at what are the trade routes that we can find? Why we admire continents and European Union is because there's a lot of trade being done within the countries in the European Union. It's not solely reliant on other people taking our resources. So for me, there has to be an African strategy, and I'm glad there's already a framework on that. But how to implement, how do we trade around ourselves? The biggest programs that are coming up, which is really in electrification of transportation as well, is DRC going to be the hub of batteries? Is Ghana or even Sierra Leone going to be hub of partners? And determine what these countries are. So when we do go to European Union, where we do go to other countries, they know exactly where our investment points are, and we can invest overall. And the role of the UN Energy is to help countries think through that, and to help countries not being selfish as well. Not everyone is going to get a green manufacturing zone. It's not going to happen, right? But who is the most strategic to have it that benefits the rest of the region? And that's where we have to come together. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I mean, I think this is why earlier this year we launched the Global Council for Critical Mineral Development in the Global South with our partners, Swaniti Global, that are here, but also the University of California at Davis, is to really support the countries in the Global South to better understand their competitive advantages, to speak in one voice, and to just identify the opportunity, but then also to operationalize it. So thank you for that, Damilola. We're now entering into phase 2 of this panel. Damilola, we can also let you go. Not that we are throwing you off the panel, but we are requesting you to. And we're going to go into a little bit of a hearing from Africa session, right? Marit, can I request you to yeah, perfect. And really the hope for us in this session is to do a little bit of a go in listening mode and really try and understand what will it take to have better cooperation between the African Union and between the countries. So we have 2 countries in the Union here, but also to hear from you. And so our friends at the Africa-Europe Foundation can take these messages and see how we can facilitate much closer cooperation and how we can reimagine the Africa-Europe partnership. So maybe, Dr. Yamkela, if I can start with you, especially since you have a newly minted green growth plan that was launched not even 10 days ago. And that in many ways lays out both the economic opportunity, but also the very large investment requirement, as well as the demand that you have. We were hearing from Damilola before that every single piece of this energy transition will require materials. How do we make sure that those materials are homegrown? So maybe to you for the first word.
We have a green growth plan. If we go complete net zero, 39 billion. if we just follow a low carbon path without net zero, probably 6 billion to 15 billion. So we need resources. So first people said, well, you don't have a plan, you don't have a vision. Now we have it. We also have projects. And one of those projects is a major hydro project. When you talk about green minerals, green transition, one key component is having the energy available. Because what people tell our countries is, you can't add value if you don't have the power source. Africa is endowed with water. We can do the green minerals, we can do the green manufacturing. In fact, we can help our mining sector go green by providing green power. So I would say with Europe, number one, let us build some more trust with good investments in our renewable energy resources. I think that many pledges have been made to us in the past, and we've not seen the resources. So if we begin to talk about critical minerals now, a new relationship, of course our leaders ask, what about the old promises? And I think one key area now is help us get that energy base that we need, that base load power that will help us industrialize, that will help us, in fact, beneficiate some of these minerals. I think that's key. Second, I mentioned carbon finance. We know Europe itself is cash strapped, like every other region. They have to take care of their own needs. But carbon trading is a big opportunity. And one of the discussions we've had in the Africa-Europe Foundation, in one of our dinners with eminent personalities, is what if Europe was to establish a base price for African carbon? So we don't have cowboys coming in and offering us $5 a ton. So Europe, you are a good partner. Help us establish a floor. Let's work together instead of individual partnerships. Because what we fear is the following. You can call it individual country partnerships. Others will call it something else, but everybody is cornering the market. And we see it. Whatever title you give it, you're cornering a market. And that's what we don't want to have. I worry about that. I feel the geopolitics. I'm sitting in an important enough position to feel the pressures. Because Joe comes in with a proposal, Jane comes in the other window with another proposal. And it's all the same. How much of your minerals can I get for my own interest? That relationship has to change. So I say, let's build trust with Europe. Let's start from, indeed, some of the support we need in our energy sector. We can then talk about some other things, but let some old commitments be fulfilled.
Thank you so much. DG Maduekwe, I think taking it to you, I mean, Nigeria also has a net zero plan. It also realizes the very large economy-wide changes that are coming. And you have a very young population that is going to eventually come into the job market. And in many ways, I mean, this whole transition is going to generate a lot of jobs, but there are also going to be a lot of jobs in the entire mining value chain. Is there already strategic thinking about how to engage in this opportunity?
Good evening, and thank you for having us here to speak on this panel. Thank you very much. For us, one of the key things that this government has done is something known as the Project Evergreen. The Project Evergreen is, again, pushing the conversation on green industrialization, developing what you'd know as eco-industrial hub, where we can manufacture these renewable energy solutions. So for us, yes, how do we add value along the supply chain? It's expensive to import these renewable energy solutions. And so there's a need for us to manufacture them in Nigeria. And that's what the government has had possible. Because again, like you've said, we have the young population. We have to be able to produce, have job opportunities for them. And having these manufacturing sites in Nigeria creates those jobs. That's number one. Number two, the government is also taking active steps to ensure that various various strategic partnerships and alignments are also being made to engage the partners, right? And we're reaching out to partners to say, where do you see yourself? And you know that we have a very elaborate energy transition plan that we had support from SEforALL as well in producing, which is very clear as to the pipeline of projects that Nigeria is going to need investment in. So that also says to you that we know what we want, we know where we want the money, and we know where we need your investment. But also very key, in addition to that, not but very key is, and I think they've touched on it, which is capacity building. You find out that we don't want the story of fossil fuel. We don't want the story of crude oil. Now that there's this clamor and we know where the market is, we want to change the narrative. How do you ensure that the solid minerals, the minerals are being produced, are being extracted in a sustainable manner? How do you ensure circular economy in the whole production chain? And what we have as a country, we now have a circular economy policy that also indicates extended producer responsibility, cradle to the grave. So these are the things we've put in place. Thank you.
Marit, coming back to you, I think, both from Sierra Leone and Nigeria, we've heard about the intentionality of greening supply chains, of localization, of keeping value and jobs and economic prosperity to the extent possible in country. But if I was to ask you a question, which is mostly you setting homework for us, you helped us kick off this council, as well as homework perhaps for the Africa-Europe Foundation. What can we do to actually make this happen, to prepare countries to go into really meaningful partnerships that will yield, that are saprophytic, that will yield benefit for both partners? And so how can we best support these governments?
Thank you very much. That's a tough question, but it's a serious one. Sierra Leone mentioned that sometimes, the bilaterals that countries have also give us sometimes headaches because we have a strategy as Africa. It's not binding. By the way, I mean, if Nigeria just ratified the AMDC, the African Minerals Development Center statutes, but we are only at 4 ratifications and we need 15. Sierra Leone is still not. I'm putting you on the spot, but the point is that if I know they're not binding per se, because that's how the AU is. I mean, countries are sovereign, but these are principles that African countries have adopted. The vision and the green mineral strategy, we are still socializing it, so there's still time, but it will be our strategy for Africa. So we have all these strategies, but then we know what to do. We know the policies. We have, and that, like I said, most producing countries have reformed their policies since 2009, not attributed directly to the Africa Mining Vision, but there is an understanding that things should not go business as usual, especially with the policies, with local content, value addition, refining. At least in the law and regulations, they're there. And I know of the Sierra Leone one because we did the policies in Sierra Leone, and of course Nigeria also. But the problem, again, like you're saying, building the ecosystem around value addition, for example. I mentioned the energy, the infrastructure, the capital, the skills, the technology. And we Bloomberg did a study in 2021 because saying that there is costs and emissions, since we are at COP, advantage to having local refining and processing than shipping to other jurisdictions and then refining them there and getting them back. So we have the data. And talking about data, we also need the geological data, and that we're also working on. So I'm encouraged that you are working on to assist. But this ecosystem that I talked about, that needs to happen. That's when we need partnerships. Even with the other global south countries, for example, that have managed to do some of the refining. And it seems daunting when you talk about this like this, but if you have the right skills, the right technology, the right capital, and we do have, Damilola was talking about solutions, African solutions. We are also trying to have African solutions, even for getting the financing. We do have our Afrexim Bank, African Development Bank, but we also have the African Minerals Classification AMREC Park in our midst. That you can leverage your minerals reserves to capital markets to be able to have some funds for African investors to invest in Africa. So we are thinking all of this, but we need your anchoring. And I think SEforALL and your council can be the anchor to think through thinking, but also doing. Think and do think kind of thing. So we look forward to the collaboration. Thank you.
I think our partners here have heard us. Our work is set out for us. But just reflecting on this, I would like to actually invite yet another panelist. This is a very dynamic session, as you can tell. We are revealing it as we go. So Mr. Marco Rasconi, please join us on stage. He's the director of the Italian Development Agency. And it's really important to hear also your reflections on this closer collaboration, especially not just as the Italian government, but also the G7 presidency at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I mean, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you. I thought I was invited to be, to take some questions. Myself is now. I find myself now indirectly on the panelist stage. However, I would like to comment, to make some comments on the point that also the Director General of the European Union raised in his intervention, with a very concrete example of how we can combine development, sustainable development, at the same time also knowing that there are some resources which are precious and fundamental also for the energy transition, for the green transition. And I want to refer now to Lobito Corridor. I don't know who knows that. Unfortunately, I mean, the countries which are represented here are not part of this project. We're talking about this, another part of Africa with Angola, the RDC, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Zambia as well. So the idea was to revamp, to rehabilitate an old trade corridor, and all the railways, which was built in a bad time, colonial time, but then, I mean, was subjected to some distraction because of the civil war in Angola. And the original purpose of the railways was to bring raw materials to the coast so that they could be exported and processed somewhere else, which is not the intention today. The raw materials are mainly copper, which is fundamental for the energy transition. They refer to this so-called copper belt, which includes all these three countries. So the idea now is that a railway cannot be only a way to transport materials or goods. Our idea that, first of all, railways must transport people. So help people to move, to communicate, also to go and work, to find new possibility of work. I mean, being in the same continent, in the same country. So at the G7 summit, this issue was raised because the three countries, they had an agreement on that, and the European Union also pledged to contribute to the program together with the United States and Italy as well. I mean, pledged. Our Prime Minister, she was here yesterday. I think the only G7 country member, because we chair it, but she would have come anyway. And we pledge also to put additional 300 million euros to this big project, which is a project of infrastructure, but we don't see it only under this view, because we think that around a corridor, around an infrastructure can develop a number of activities which are sustainable, which implies also the role of communities, which go also on toward the needs of the food security. And the raw materials, also the raw materials, they could be transported, but not necessarily to harbor or to port to go overseas. They could also be transported to reach, areas where they can be processed locally. And localization was another key word that we have heard tonight, this evening, so that they can also be part and factor of further development, but localized in that place.
And thank you also, of course, for taking this request that is, we've put you on the spot a little bit, but I think in many ways, this has also been, at least for me, looking from the outside, in many ways the hallmark of your presidency. I mean, the closer cooperation between the G7 and Africa, between Italy and Africa, has been something that we have not seen in previous presidencies. Even the issue of energy access that you have championed. I mean, this is really beginning to show the importance of integrated thinking. Before we move into the reception and fun part of this evening, I am going to offer all of you the opportunity to ask this very illustrious panel questions. Thank you for bearing with us, but you're going to have to earn that drink. So, any questions? We have a handheld mic that's going to come to you. Please
Thank you.
do introduce yourself as well, sir.
Yeah, my name is Patrick Kormawa. I come from Sierra Leone. My question is for you from the African Union. We would like to learn more about the critical minerals vision or strategy, because we are hoping that we can learn from what is done at the continental level, perhaps to domesticate it at the sub-regional level, knowing full well that Sierra Leone, Liberia, Guinea, these are countries with critical minerals, and our laws, regulations are all very different. And also noting that whatever happens in any of those countries normally do have effect on the other. So what programs do you have to domesticate from the continental to the sub-region and perhaps towards our that Mano River Union? Thank you.
Marit.
Thank you very much for this very pertinent question. I'm glad you asked because we have the African Mining Vision since 2009, and it was adopted by African heads of state and government in 2009, and Sierra Leone also has aligned some of its principles towards the African Mining Vision. This green mineral strategy, African green mineral strategy, we developed it. It's about, somebody was talking about electrification. It's not just, it's industrialization and electrification. It's just transition. The strategy is to industrialize, but also to electrify, because we are aware that 600 people are still in the dark in Africa. So we look at it from the whole value chain perspective, but we also use it as a just transition roadmap, so to speak, strategy. So we have introduced it in a specialized technical committee meeting where on trade, industry, and minerals in Malabo, Equatorial Guinea in May. All African countries were invited, ministers and technical people. I don't recall Sierra Leone was part of it. I have to check but it was not adopted then. They needed more time for consultation because it's very thorough. So we are going to retable it again at the end of this year in December, and I will make sure to get and hopefully Sierra Leone will be represented. And our center, the African Minerals Development Center, was supposed to go to Guinea, by the way. Since 2 years, we are still at the headquarters of the African Union because of, how do I say, unconstitutional change of government from Guinea. But what I'm saying is we are coming to your region as well, physically. And we work with all African countries regardless, but specifically we were supposed to go to Guinea, and that decision was made in 2018. Yes. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I just want to pick up on this theme of collaboration. So my first question is there a very good example or even a decent example of a complete value chain that exists in Africa? Or is there an example of something that is being developed where, the resource is there, the beneficiation is there, the final manufacturing is there, etc. And if there is an example, is there any lessons you've learned that have worked to create that kind of value chain?
I don't know of any complete value chain, value addition process that exists like that. We don't have. That's why we want it now. We're looking at models. Of course, the model that many of us have looked at is the Indonesian case. Yeah, they had nickel. They put some policies in place. At one point, they even banned export of nickel. And of course, they attracted 12 or 14 billion from China and other places. And today, they have the whole value chain of battery production as well. It works for them. We don't know if it will work for us. Timing is also a question here. But who says it would not? Yeah? And maybe if we look at it regionally, it could be different. Maybe it's not Zambia alone. It's Zambia, South Africa, and Congo together. So I'm happy the Italians are trying to build that corridor, but probably we could do the same ourselves. 300 million is great, but we hope some will also go into battery production because we have the manganese also in those locations. We have the graphite in those locations. South Africa is sitting on 70% of the platinum. Congo, 50, 60% of the cobalt. So we are saying, but we need that infrastructure. Yesterday, I'm also serving as co-chair of a new council we launched now on critical transition minerals under the Paris Peace Forum. We gave our own 7 recommendations yesterday as part of this process of beginning to discuss. South Africa will be hosting the consortium of development finance institutions in February. We're co-organizing now a panel there also on critical minerals because it comes to the issue of ecosystem development that my sister just mentioned. We need the DFIs to be plugged into this. A good case. If Italy has already announced this wonderful project of the rail along the Lobido corridor, will DFIs now look at the opportunities for trade along that corridor? You know, there was a time India was looking at that corridor, also Mumbai, Delhi, for a similar idea as an industrial corridor. So this is why we believe that session we're going to do in South Africa in February matters with the DFIs. So we're taking the conversation of critical minerals to other platforms because we need to build those ecosystems. And it is our hope that the South African G20 meeting can pick that up as a major issue for Africa. We need to drive it from Africa as well. As I say, everybody has an interest. Our interest is clear. We need to create these jobs. And for my European friends, I always say, when we're 2 billion next door to you, you want to have friends with that kind of population. You want to have markets. Let's build those markets together. And we need the infrastructure, but we also need the other follow-on investments to create the industrial base. It is about industrialization rather than just commodity trade. So really, Italy's initiative we welcome, but a lot of that will circle around, again, having good energy systems in place. And that's why I'm happy it is Sustainable Energy for All that is hosting this discussion, because it will come back to energy.
Just a couple of words to say, to recall 2 important words that I've listened to. One is the regional approach. So when you mentioned a number of raw materials, not located all of them in the same country, but they are scattered everywhere. So we have to combine the resources and to, think together that we can start really reasoning at the regional or continental level, but the regional there are already the regional economic communities, which are an important factor of development. We should stress this more. The other thing is the trade. So it was mentioned before, also this very important step that the African countries, they took all together to develop a free trade area all around Africa, and this will be another tremendous boost also to development and also to industrialization.
I have a question for you, Dr. Yamkela, as to how you are able to do so many different things, but I'll save that for drinks. We have one final question here, and then we will close.
Luciano Martini, I'm from RSC, National Research Center in Italy. We support the Ministry of Environment and Energy Security. I'm not an expert in critical minerals, but an expert in power system. You mentioned that to exploit at best the mining sector, you need a reliable, affordable, strong power system. I'm also very active in mission innovation. We want to exploit the clean energy technology and accelerate. We started dealing with the innovation priority our member care about. We don't have an African member, so we now approach AUDA and EPAT colleagues to understand which are the innovative priority for you, so which is the best way to enter a dialogue and support you and decide what can be done together. We want to go for national pilot that prove that certain solution can be replicated broadly. Maybe you have something to share with us and we can do the same. A win-win. We are looking for a win-win collaboration, nothing teaching or learning, both.
Every year at COP, I try to do one deal, and I just got my deal here. We have a hydro dam that was built by Italy, finished 25 years ago. We left, it was for 4 turbines. They only put 2. Now I need to put the 2 more and also do solar, hybrid solar. So I want us to make a deal. That's a deal here. It's energy, but let me tell you why it's important. It is right next to our 2 big iron ore mines. We need to green those iron ore mines. The demand we've projected for those mines is 500 megawatts. The whole country has 250 megawatts. So imagine new energy, you add 210 megawatts, you make money, you make the country green, but also our mining becomes green. So that's the deal. But for mission, your mission agenda, Chad Holiday had spoken to me as well. So I may be part of your panel. As you say, I'm everywhere because centrally somewhere, energy is always there.
More work for Dr. Yomkela, but we are always happy to please and have transactions going through. With that, it's my honor to hand to Mr. Paul Walton, the Executive Director of the Africa-Europe Foundation and a close friend of SEforALL.
Okay, so I'm between you and the drinks, so I'm going to be very brief. I mentioned to colleagues this morning that I have 3 small children who made that very penetrating question: why are you in Baku? And when children ask it, it's not an easy answer. But I think when it comes to the work that we do at the Africa-Europe Foundation, there's 2 main reasons why this conversation is very impactful. And I think the first is for the potential, and I think we heard that on the panel today. It actually sounds, as you said, very straightforward. You know, there's technology, there's expertise, transition minerals, this nexus of climate action and economic development. It's there. So in a way, it's about that kind of partnership that needs to be built. And equally, as a second point, the reason this is a very meaningful conversation is because of what it represents in terms of a complete shift in paradigm, at least when it comes to Africa and Europe working together. Because again, if I hear what's been said in the last hour in terms of how to shift that paradigm when it comes to mutual interests, mutual values, when it comes to being able to do foresight, look into where these 2 continents go in the next 20, 30 years, look for those kind of commonalities, I think this particular theme holds a huge amount of potential. And for an organization that's shared by Africa, shared by Europe, this is really key. We're convinced that the development cooperation model of the past is not effective. And I think the conversation today represents very much the future. Just as a final point, I think it's equally been said on the panel that there is complexity, even contentious issues that I think need to be unpacked. And again, I think that's from our experience as a young organization, the safe space to be able to do that conversation carefully at Africa Europe will pay off. Because if we have the safe space for that conversation, if we build the trust, and I certainly think we have the partnerships and the ecosystem, I really believe this agenda can be transformative for all of us and can make a huge difference. So on behalf of the Africa Europe Foundation, huge thank you to everyone who's been here. Huge thank you to all of you for joining us. And I can only reinforce our absolute commitment to make sure this conversation transforms into action. Thank you very much.